In last week's episode, I told you that nearly half of people using AI chatbots for mental health support said it helped them. And that data was real. That episode was not wrong. But here's the truth about good psychology and good science in general. You don't get to stop at the findings that confirms the story you like. So today we're doing something a little different. We're going to go back into the AI and mental health conversation, but this time we're putting the other side of the data on the table. Researchers at Brown University identified 15 specific ways that AI chatbots violate basic mental health standards. The American Psychological Association, they issued a formal health advisory about it. And there's a term circulating in the psychiatric literature right now that should make all of us pay some attention. AI psychosis. This is not about scaring you away from a tool that's helping people. It's about understanding it well enough to use it wisely. So let's get nerdy about both sides.
Welcome to Nerdy Psychology. Break it down with a little curiosity. You'll be curious, stay kind, keep your mind nerdy.
Let's be honest about, why this conversation matters right now with real numbers behind it. According to a 2026 National Academy of Medicine panel, roughly 1 in 3 people have used an AI chatbot for emotional support at some point. And among people under 30, about a quarter use chatbots at least monthly, just to look up health information or seek advice. This isn't fringe behavior anymore, it's mainstream, and the APA agrees. In a formal health advisory released to providers, the organization stated plainly that millions of people are turning to general purpose AI chatbots to address real mental health needs that aren't being met elsewhere. Why? Well, the APA names the same drivers we discussed in the last episode: a genuine mental health provider shortage, rural and underserved resources and limited access, and a healthcare system that often de-incentivizes providers from accepting insurance. People aren't necessarily choosing AI over therapy. Many are choosing it because therapy, as it currently exists, may not always be reachable. And that context matters because it reframes the conversation. This isn't AI versus therapist. It's millions of people are already doing this. So what do we need to know to do it safely? And that's the nerdy lens we're going to look through for today. This is the part in the episode that I think you're going to find genuinely fascinating because the research methodology here is unusually rigorous for this type of space. Researchers at Brown University, working directly with licensed clinical psychologists, ran a year-long study with trained peer counselors. People already skilled in cognitive behavior therapy had self-counseling conversations with the major AI models, including different versions of ChatGPT and Claude. The chats were prompted specifically to act like a therapist using evidence-based techniques. Then licensed psychologists review those conversations, specifically looking for ethics violations. And what they found was a framework of 15 distinct ethical risks, organized into 5 categories. So let's go through them because each one of these teaches us something different about how these systems, they actually behave. Category 1, the lack of contextual adaptation. The AI ignores someone's actual lived experience and offers this one-size-fits-all generic advice. Think like, have you tried journaling responses to someone describing a deeply specific trauma? Category 2, poor therapeutic collaboration. The model dominates the conversation. Or more concerning, it reinforces a user's false belief instead of gently challenging it. In therapy, a core skill is knowing when to validate a feeling without validating the distorted thoughts attached to that feeling. That distinction is subtle, and the research found around AI models routinely miss it. Category 3, deceptive empathy. This one is unsettling once you kind of sit with it. The model uses phrases like, I understand, I see you, language that often creates this emotional sense of, well, connection, without anything resembling actual understanding behind it. The researchers call this false sense of empathy. Category 4, unfair discrimination. The model showed gender, cultural, or religious bias in their responses, not as slurs or anything that obvious, but more subtle skews in whose experiences got validated and whose got minimized. Category 5, lack of safety and crisis management. This is the most clinically serious category. It includes denying service on sensitive topics, failing to refer to the appropriate human resources, and in documented cases, responding with what researchers described as indifferent to self-harming behaviors. Here's a quote from one of the lead researchers that I think kind of nails the core issue. Human therapists carry real accountability. There are licensing boards, there are consequences for malpractice. When an AI chatbot makes the same errors, there's no equivalent structure holding it accountable at all. And that's not a reason to panic, it's a structural gap we should all understand that we're operating inside of. Now, let's talk about the phrase that's been circulating in the psychiatric and tech journalism for over the past year, AI psychosis. To be clear from the outset, this is not an official clinical diagnosis. You're not going to find this in the DSM. It's just an emerging term that clinicians and journalists are using to describe a specific pattern, cases where extended emotional, intense interaction with a chatbot appears to have contributed to or intensified a user's break from shared reality. It reinforced delusions or spiritual fixations or conspiracy style thinking that the chatbot validated rather than gently challenging. And here's a mechanism as best as researchers currently understand it. Many AI chatbots are designed intentionally or as a byproduct of their training, well, to be agreeable, to be helpful, to be validating. That's usually the feature. But a small number of vulnerable individuals already at risk for psychosis or severe dissociation, an endlessly agreeable conversation partner that never pushes back can act less like a sounding board and more like an echo chamber that amplifies the person's most distorted thoughts. And this is why the APA's health advisory specifically calls out the need to reduce what they term high risk features. And these systems, specifically naming the importance of limiting and preventing AI models from validating or promoting delusional thinking. And I want to be really precise here because nuance matters. This appears to affect a small subset of users, often people with pre-existing vulnerabilities, psychotic symptoms, or severe isolation. It is not evidence that using ChatGPT for stress management will cause psychosis in typical psychologically healthy people. But it is evidence that these systems were not built with psychiatric safety in their design principle. And for vulnerable individuals, that gap can have serious consequences. There's also an emerging concern specifically about voice-based AI. Some researchers argue that chatbots that talk back in warm, human-sounding voice can create stronger illusion of relationship and trust than text alone, meaning the same risky content might land differently and more dangerously depending on how it's delivered. And regulation in this space hasn't caught up to that distinction yet. So here's the nerdy psychology synthesis. Both things are true. AI chatbots are genuinely helping people access support they couldn't get otherwise. And these same systems have documented, researcher-verified ethical blind spots that can cause real harm, especially to vulnerable users. So here's how we can navigate that honestly. Watch for deceptive empathy patterns yourself. Once you know this term, you can start noticing it. When an AI says, I understand how hard that must be, that's a generated sentence pattern, not felt experience. That doesn't make it useless words of validation can still feel soothing in the moment, but it's worth periodically asking yourself, am I getting something real out of this exchange? Or am I getting the performance of being understood without the relationship that usually comes with it? A good question of self-reflection can be to ask yourself, did this replace something I needed from an actual human? Or did it supplement what I was already getting elsewhere? And that distinction matters. Tool 2, build in a disagreement check. Because chatbots tend towards agreeableness, you can use that knowledge actively. If you're using AI to process a difficult belief about yourself or relationship, deliberately ask it to argue the other side, or ask, what might a licensed person say to push back on me here? This doesn't fix the underlying problems, but it can interrupt this echo chamber effect. So if an AI's response to something painful feels a little too easy, a little too validating, treat that as a flag rather than a comfort. 3, know who's in your corner before you need them. The APA advisory is explicit that any responsible user of these tools require clear access to human-led crisis resources, not buried in fine print, but visible and immediate. You can build that same safety net for yourself regardless of what app or model you're using. If you're someone who uses AI tools regularly for emotional processing, write down on paper, not just in your notes app, the name of one human you'd call in a genuine crisis, plus the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Keep both somewhere you'd actually see them on hand in the moment. The goal isn't distrust of the tools, it's making sure the tool never is your only option. Now it's time for my favorite part of these episodes, the nerdy research meter. Remember, this isn't about deciding whether the study is good or bad. It's about asking one simple question. How confident should we be in applying these findings today? To learn more about the ratings on the nerdy research meter, they'll be in the description below. For today's study, I am giving it a good promise evidence rating. Why? Because this wasn't simply a collection of opinions. Brown University researchers worked alongside licensed mental health professionals over an extended period systematically to evaluate how AI chatbots responded in real therapeutic situations. And that's a thoughtful and rigorous approach. However, the study focused on whether AI responses met professional ethical standards, not on long-term patient outcomes. So while it provides compelling current evidence that AI systems can, violate important ethical principles, we still need additional research to understand how those violations can affect people over time. Research tells us what was found. Psychology helps us understand what it means and how to use it wisely. Here's my nerdy take. One study can tell us that many people feel helped by AI. Another can tell us that sometimes it violates ethical standards that we expect from licensed clinicians. And these findings aren't contradictory, they're complementary. One explored people's experiences while one evaluated the quality of safety and interaction. And together, they remind us something that can feel helpful, can still have limitations. This episode is sponsored by my workbook, Your Next Chapter. If this episode has you thinking about how you process stress and where you turn to for support, this workbook offers a structured, clinician-developed way to build that self-awareness with practical tools for emotional well-being, coping skills, and navigating life's harder chapters. It's designed by me, a clinician, to be something that you could actually use, not just read, and the link is in the description below. If this two-part conversation on AI and mental health gave you something to chew on, I invite you to like and subscribe and tell me in the comments, has an AI chatbot ever surprised you for better or worse? Good psychology rarely lives in single headlines. It lives in tension between the two things. AI chatbots are helping people access support that didn't exist for them before, And they're doing it without guardrails, accountability, or training that human providers are required to have. And holding both of these facts at once isn't confusing, it's just honest. And honest is what we do here. If today's conversation surprised you, I'd actually encourage you to watch the companion episode to this one. In that video, we looked at the research showing that many people reported AI helped improve their mental health. Today's episode explored the other side of that evidence, the ethical concerns. Together, these two videos tell a much more complete story than one could do on its own. Like always, the link to this article will be in the description below. And remember, until next time, be curious, stay kind, and keep your mind nerdy. That's a wrap. See you next week.
Be curious, stay kind, keep your mind nerdy.